Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk about the importance of language, especially if you're a writer. Now, before I do, I will just say that if you would like to support this channel, um, you might want to purchase my book, The Ecstasy and the Ignominy, or any of my other books. It is a literary and historical novel, maybe a little bit of gothic fiction. It's kind of a combination between Anna Karenina. Um, Crime and Punishment, A Tale of Two Cities, and it has many Dickensian and Shakespearean overtones. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I wanted to talk about why language is important because what separates um, human beings from other animals? Well, we can use language in a way that they cannot. Now, of course, you have parrots and things who can mimic language, but they're not using it in a creative or abstract way. Um, Only humans can do that. And yes, other animals, especially birds, can make music. But for us, language is our music. Language is the music of humanity. That is what makes humanity unique. And I think that when you realize that and you value the importance of language, then it can become your superpower, especially when it comes to things like metaphor and simile. Because one of the reasons why metaphors and similes work so well is because as human beings we are products of nature. When we can put images together in a more concrete way that's more than abstract, we can relate to it more on a visual level, and it can become more concrete and more vivid, and in some cases more beautiful in our own minds. Um, when you can combine words with with imagery and harmonize that with nature, and use that in a creative way, that will create some of the most beautiful images that have ever been written or created. Um, Language, in some ways, is the music of the soul. It is through it that we often discover truths about ourselves that sometimes we can't discover unless we first put them into words. So that is the beauty and mystique and majesty of language. And I've actually been somewhat skilled at using things like simile and metaphor. Um, even before I was even before I started writing or reading a lot, even when well, I wouldn't say that as a child I was particularly good at it. I would say in many ways I was not good at it. But once I became a teenager, once I hit puberty, I found that I became a lot better at using language as a writer. When I started reading, especially writers like Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe, I tried to not imitate that, but I tried to write beautifully and found that I could in fact write metaphorically, that I could use similes, and of course over time as I developed those skills, I became a much better writer. But I would say that I had, once I hit puberty especially, I had a knack for it, especially for creating metaphors and simile, even before I started reading a lot. Um, I think for some people it just comes natural. I think it is innate within human nature itself to actually be gifted at such things, and and so. But to me, especially things like metaphor and simile, um, when you use that, you are going beyond the utilitarian. You're going into the poetic, and like I said, poetry can create quite a lot of meaning. Like for example, if I were to read to you, if I can find the passage, which is in I should have had this ready, I know, but when the character of Catherine in my book, The Ecstasy and the Ignominy, is about to give herself to Edward, who has been who has been pursuing her because he's in love with her, but she's a married woman, married to his boss, who's this industrialist. I'm not going to go into that, but when she finally gives in, she says, "I begged you to stay away, to not defile the innocence of a rose and blossom, but I have since realized, through agony and regret, that I bloomed for you, my star of night, making beauty out of darkness and light." Now, when she compares him, for example, to something like the stars, or she talks about herself being a rose, she's talking about her change of mind and how she was really thriving because of him all along, not because of her husband. And but if she just said that, it would be boring. What made that passage interesting was that she was telling it through metaphor. Because when we again when we speak in metaphors, um, these ideas that are abstract become much more concrete and visual in our minds, and that creates a kind of beauty. And beauty can be very difficult to explain because beauty, like music, touches us on such a visceral level that sometimes it can be difficult to put into words why something works or why it doesn't work. But I think it often, I think that I think that especially beauty, seeing language through beauty, that goes back even before writing, when we were telling stories around campfires, when we were when we heard stories as children. Sometimes, have you ever heard, for example, your grandfather or someone older or wise tell you a story, and you think to yourself, wow, that sounds beautiful, or even that sounds eerie. Language can be used for many things. It can be used for the purposes of beauty. It can also be used um, for shock value. And writers use language to this effect all the time. We have to be hyper aware of language and how it is presented and how it is framed, and how it hears both to the ear, how it reads. We have to be aware of all of those things in order for us to actually use language effectively. And for the poet, or for the author who writes literary fiction, who tries to create beauty, language is just as important. Language is just as important as a brush that a painter uses. We use um, language like brushes. And in some cases, I actually think that language can be more effective at painting pictures than brushes ever can, especially because as writers, when we use language, we are participating in a collaboratory medium where I will describe something. Let's say I say that the sky is red or blue or whatever, just to give you a simple example. But everyone has their own idea of what a red sky looks like, or what a blue sky looks like, or whatever. And my idea from what that looks like will be very different from your idea. So even though I'm providing the foundation, you're building on it in your own mind. So in that sense, language is more of a democratizing force when it comes to creating beauty, because the audience is participating and making the beauty themselves as well. And so in that sense, writing and using beauty through language and poetry, it's a collaborative medium. And that's something that a lot of people, I don't think, realize, that language and writing can be a collaborative medium. And so and so I would encourage writers and artists to think about language on a deep level, to think about what it can do. Um, for example, if you're going to write, for example, "I'm angry," instead of doing that, you might want to write, um, "A tempest has stirred within my soul." Or if you're going to write about love, instead of saying, "Well, I love her," you can say, "His love was deeper than the river of time." That's a far more concrete image than if he were to just say, "His love was great." That's not something that is going to be memorable. But when you harmonize those things, when you harmonize emotion, meaning, and imagery, that creates a far more potent and beautiful image within the reader's mind. And so I would just encourage you to be aware of poetry and poetic language because it can really help you create not just beauty, but empathy as well. And so, with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, my books are linked in the description section. Um, you might want to check out The Ecstasy and the Ignominy. And until next time, goodbye.